Okay. Hello, Beverley.
Hello, Georgie.
Nice to see you. So we're just going to have a bit of a chat. We'll see if anybody's going to join us, but we've always got plenty to talk about. Even and I know people will. We were already talking about a subject, and we were saying, no, let's wait. Let's talk about it when we get closer. But in the meantime, just remind us where you are, Beverley.
So I am actually based by the sea, actually, Shoreham by Sea near Brighton. So, and I speak to a lot of clients on Zoom, but I also have a clinic that I go to, and the outlook is a beautiful marina, which is really lovely.
I photo on your Facebook, actually, and it was lovely. Yeah, absolutely lovely.
And it is. It's a real pleasure to go there. I go there on a Wednesday and see clients face to face.
Right.
So that's where I am, or as I said, on Zoom. So I've got clients in different places, different countries even.
Yep.
And I enjoy the mixture, if I'm really honest.
Yes, and I think when I was seeing face-to-face and online, I quite enjoyed the difference as well.
Yes, yeah. Because being on computer all day long is not conducive.
No. It's always good to get out anyway.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's wherever we are. And I know many people working in an office constantly and long hours, for example, in London. But, if they get a chance to just get out of the workplace, well, there's already been evidence showing that if you take a break in your lunch break away from your office, you are more productive in the afternoon.
Yes.
So we might as well.
Yeah. I mean, do you remember the times when we used to get not only lunch breaks, we used to get coffee breaks.
Coffee breaks. And smoking breaks. I don't know. Do they still get the smoking breaks? People.
I don't think they get smoking breaks now, but I remember that you'd start work and then you'd get a coffee break, and then you'd get a lunch break, and then you'd get an afternoon coffee break. And in all fairness, the effectiveness, when I think back, when you did work, you constantly worked.
Yes.
Whereas what happens now is we grab something quickly, or I don't now, but I remember at one time grabbing something quickly and eating it at the desk, but then you find your concentration levels go.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at some of the countries where they, and I can't remember which country it is, where they do 4-day weeks now, or they say when you get over 40, then the optimum is cutting down to 30 hours, or the figures aren't right, but you know what I mean. But the less we work, the more effective we are. Because otherwise we're just constantly working, and you can't, and the whole ethos of like London businesses and solicitors and working long hours and ridiculous hours, and yet they're less productive by working such long hours, but it still stays the same.
And the biggest cost of businesses, and this is on ONS, on the government websites, all different websites, is sickness due to stress, and that's long-term sickness as well, because people overwork and then they crash.
Yes.
And it's not a figure that's actually put into the budget, so it's not forecast. So it has devastating implications in businesses.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And the sad thing is that the evidence is there, isn't it? And yet so many businesses are just not willing to even look at it.
No. And yet the return on their investment, because they're always looking for an ROI, would be huge. And, I haven't got the evidence here to support that figure, but when you look at the biggest cost to them at the moment, it doesn't take, an accountant a lot of time to work out how much money and time that would actually reap back for them if they had time for lunch breaks, etc.
Absolutely. And I remember many years ago, soon after doing this work, I went and spoke to the chief accountant in an accounting office. And he was fully on board with this. And I basically said, go and have a look at your attrition rates, how often you're losing people. But I bet you, if you look at your sickness absences, you'll see that there's a big increase before Christmas and probably also Easter. And he was able to do that. He actually pulled off 3 years of statistics of how much much sickness rate there were. And there was you could see, we could see the spike over Christmas, and there was a smaller one at Easter. And he was fully on board with thinking, yeah, we really need to sort of educate our staff and help them with this. And he went off to talk to his co-directors, and he came back saying, I'm really sorry, but we've got a board of 10 male accountants, and I'm the only one on board with this, even though he's trying to tell them how much money they would save by educating people about stress and about health and well-being and preventative. But no, we never went ahead because he couldn't convince his colleagues.
Sad. And when you look at December and April as well, for me, what that picks up on is the seasons.
Yes, which we started talking about, and then I said, don't talk about it yet. So first of all, before you start, Beverley, I just want to say hello to everybody who's joining us. Please do pop a comment in so we know who's there. Just say hello. And if you've got any questions as we're going along, please do. Or even not just questions, just in the comments box, experiences you've had or anything that you feel in alignment with or against what we're talking about. But yes, so Beverley, the seasons.
Well, the seasons are prevalent. And this is something that I've always been aware of with myself personally about how I interact. So I love summer. I am a spring, summer, autumn. I am not a winter person.
I think a lot of people would say that. Hello, Chris, by the way.
Hello, Chris.
See you here.
So one of the things I couldn't get into my head a long time ago, I really enjoy doing my work and then going out for a walk or doing something like that. But obviously in the winter, it's very challenging. And so I'd often miss that going outside. Yeah. And it seems so simple. But when about 5 years ago, I learnt to turn my diary around. So in the winter, I get up and I go for my walk first before work, with or without a dog.
Yeah.
It made such a difference. And it's just one thing that makes a difference.
Yes. And even then in the winter, I struggle if I'm intending to start at, say, 9 o'clock, because it gets lighter later. So often I will change my hours in that I will sometimes come into the office and just check emails or do something, and then I will go for a walk so that I can get outside and get some fresh air.
Yeah. And it boosts you. It makes a big difference. Also, sometimes when you think about it, December, what a month of stress. And sorry, gentlemen, but particularly for women with families. And I am going to say that, and I know that's probably going to be controversial, but when you think of the deadline, Christmas Day, and what that means to a lot of families, you know, the organisation, the buying of presents, etc. So it's a financial commitment and the emotional commitment, family dynamics.
Yes, it's huge. And that's a good, I mean, we're only in July at the moment, but Christmas is coming up. But talking about Christmas, that's a real time to look at how much pressure we put on ourselves by feeling we ought to see somebody, or, you know, we ought to do this huge amount of food. I remember years and years and years ago, my father saying to my mother, we don't need all this food. We don't need to cook so many mince pies and get in so much food. It's just not required. And I've really looked at that and really sort of cutting down costs as well. I think, do we really need to provide presents for all the, you know, the siblings and the children of the siblings and the cousins or whoever? You know, I came to an agreement with all my siblings and then my husband's sibling, and decided, look, now the children are not children anymore, we are not going to provide presents for each other's children. That cut the cost so much. And we weren't the sort of family that went and spent hundreds and hundreds on presents, and not for our children either. But there is, you know, people often feel they ought to, should do, spend a lot of money, do everything perfectly for one day. And therefore, that's another great opportunity to look at how much pressure they're putting on themselves. And
I also think about Christmas Day, and this is something, you know, as you know, I co-host a podcast with Chris, and we've spoken about this before because we put so much expectation on to have the world around a table, which is lovely in the right environment, but
Yeah.
sometimes it doesn't have to be on Christmas Day. Sometimes it's okay to have a small Christmas Day, a quiet Christmas Day, and catch up with people Boxing Day or the next day.
Absolutely. And I have to admit now that I haven't cooked Christmas dinner since 2007, which was actually the year I went to see Dr. Sano. And the reason that is that my husband never cooked. He always said he wanted to, but he never got round to it, never had much time, especially in the summer months. But when I came back, he decided he wanted to cook and he would learn to cook. And the kids loved it because they got all these different meals. And then he started doing like 3-course meals on a Sunday, which is causing a lot of stress. So we put a stop to that pretty quick. But he actually really enjoys cooking. And now so does my son. So it's quite funny when they have conversations together. If my son rings and they're talking about recipes and whatever. But now Christmas is often my husband cooking Christmas dinner and my son cooking on Boxing Day. So
lovely.
So that stress is all gone. But so I know how, and I really appreciate how lucky I am. But anyway, that's Christmas.
That's Christmas. Yes.
Coming into what we both just said that is our, spring and summer, our favourite months of the year. I love the spring when all the colours are so rich. And I was saying I'd just been to Cornwall for a week. And I really decided that when we were going for walks, I would be focusing mindfully and just really noticing things. And we went for quite a long walk along the dunes along a long beach when we were down there on the west coast. And I was just amazed by how many little flowers were growing in such barren areas, just in sand. And I kept photographing all these flowers. Just miraculous how they were just popping up in the middle of nowhere in a very barren area. Probably still had lots of rain, but just sandy. And it was just really lovely just noticing them all the time.
But that's being in the moment, or mindfulness, as we often say. But being in that moment and being able to appreciate and just let go of everything else.
Yeah.
And makes such a difference. One of the things I love is taking my shoes off and walking on grass.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Just really getting that just calming, natural energy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that if I'm particularly stressed, I will go for a walk to release it. Now, I listen to my body as to whether it be a slow walk, whether it be a fast walk. Sometimes it's
yes, sometimes. Sorry, I've done those walks.
But sometimes it's been quite interesting because I thought, I'm tired. I'll go for a walk, but I'll only go for 5-10 minutes. And they've sometimes been the best walks because I've ended up just keep walking and walking and walking. Yeah. And an hour or two, I come back and I'm like, I feel so much better. But I didn't push myself. I just allowed myself to happen. And like you say, just be around nature and nurture.
Absolutely. And that fits in with, the GPs now that are in the NHS are bringing in have brought in social prescribing. Now, there's not a lot of GP practices, I believe, doing this, but I do know some that are. And the social prescribing might be doing some voluntary gardening somewhere or blue therapy where, I was talking to Dom, who is a surf school, runs a surf school in Cornwall. And I published his recovery story from back pain just before I went on holiday. And I deliberately called in to say hello to him. And we were talking about this, about the therapy that C provides and prescribing for surfing, or they do it for cooking or gardening, all the different yoga. There's so many different things, and just think of the cost savings from just prescribing medication, and running groups, walking groups, so many different ways that would enhance people's lives and help them feel better, improve their health and well-being, which would then improve their physical health as well.
Absolutely. And the value you get back from that is immense. And You know, I know Chris, who's actually making comments at the moment. She's actually a Pilates teacher, and she is doing a silent walk.
Yes.
So what that is, so I know she's doing it later on tonight. So you have your headphones and you go walking in countryside for about 45 minutes in a group, but you're listening to music. So you're in your own space, but you're outside.
Yes, lovely.
I mean, talk about sensory.
Yes,
you know,
absolutely.
Relaxation.
And it stops you talking to each other, which then is such a distraction.
Yes. So it gives you space to be moving. So you're releasing the stress by moving. You're listening to some beautiful sounds. You're in a beautiful environment, but you're allowing that stress to just come through, which is fantastic.
Absolutely.
I will be going in the sea a bit later.
Good. Yeah. So you've been doing that a lot now, haven't you?
I have, and I have to say, Georgie, you did inspire me. I remember about 18 months ago, you were in Italy. Was it 18 months or 2 years ago? You were in Italy. We're doing the cold water showers.
Oh yeah, that's over 2 years now, actually.
Yeah.
That was during the pandemic. I think after the last of the lockdowns.
Yes. Yeah. And you both started with that. And I did do it a couple of times in the shower, but I couldn't quite do the sea because I was really scared of it.
Right.
And it was only this year that I saw something to raise money for Refuge, the charity, and it was to be in water every single day. So I thought, oh, okay, I can do that. And I did it. And I'll never forget the second day I did 6:30 with a neighbour, and it was -3 degrees.
What a time of year to start doing that, Beverley.
We were scraping the ice off the windscreen. I was thinking, and this is meant to be good for me. Luckily, I took some advice, and I did have some swimming socks and swimming gloves, which made a huge difference. But now, you know, when they say 21 days is a minimum to change your habit.
Yeah, well, that was the old hat, I think.
That was,
generally they say it's like 60+ days. But,
well, all I can say is the 30 days I did it made a difference for me. So now I don't do it every day, but like tonight, it's nice and sunny. I haven't been in the sea for a few days. I am going to get my swimsuit on and I'm going to go into the sea and go in this, relax in that sea and let go.
Yeah, wonderful. If I was by the sea, I would definitely be doing that. It takes a bit longer for me to get to some water, but but I do still absolutely love it. And when we were in Cornwall, it was on the last day there, we went surfing and it was 18 degrees in the water and 16 degrees out. Well, but in fact, somebody outside the surf school, they'd written down the temperatures and the forecast and everything, and the tides, and they'd put it written underneath where it said 18 degrees. They'd drawn a bath. She said, like, the other thing I wanted to say as well was when you were talking about the silent walking and listening to music, is that we were in our Peer Connect session last night. Somebody was saying how the sound of birds singing is a really primal soothing, because if the birds are singing, then it's safe. Everything is safe. And I thought I'd not heard of that before, but it makes sense.
Yeah,
so that's interesting. So going and just listening to the birds, be helpful.
Well, if you think back, you know, to caveman times. You know, when you think of the vagus response, so without knowing, we'd sense danger. Our bodies would sense danger because of silence.
Yes.
If the birds stop singing, what's happening?
Yeah, absolutely.
But not actually knowing or actually acknowledging that they've stopped. It's just like, what's changed?
Yeah. Yes.
And our bodies haven't changed in that way because they are built to keep us alive. They're built to survive. Absolutely.
So just listening to bird music is great, and lots of evidence around nature being of such benefit for us and helping soothe our systems.
Nature.
Yeah, that's in my newsletter for this week as well, about the benefits of nature. So yes. But yes, no, I loved being by the sea. I really enjoy the sea.
So I always had on my vision board that I wanted to live in a place where I could choose where to walk, either by the sea or in the countryside.
Yes, yes.
Because I like the greenness as well. And I now have both of that, which is fantastic.
Yes.
And even when I didn't live by the sea, I would make a choice sometimes and think, where am I going to walk today? So I was always consciously walking. And sometimes I would drive an hour just to go and walk the dog for an hour by the beach.
Really?
Because it was what I wanted and what I needed.
Yes, yeah. Do you know what? I just remember then in my 20s, it was my first job actually, and I had a placement I was in for 3 months where we had an hour and a half lunch break, which was unusual. And I used to go riding in a riding stables, and because it was in the winter, they didn't have people to exercise the horses in the morning or when the kids had finished at school. So I used to go out in my lunch break and I'd drive quickly to the place, and the owner would leave a board, write on the board what horse he wanted riding and leave the tack ready. I would tack up the horse and off I'd go riding. And I remember, and I just loved it. And unfortunately, no showers there or when I got back. But that changed again. But I remember on one occasion that being a bit of a problem because he was probably a man in about his 70s at that point. But he decided to come with me one day, and he went in front. So if you're galloping behind a horse in front, you're getting the mud thrown up into you because it was a winter's day. And I went back to work and I was having to wash my face. But you know what? I remember that so clearly. And remember, memories are enhanced by emotions, aren't they? So that I don't remember any other module that I did in that first. It was the first job that I was in, but I clearly remember that because I so remembered how wonderful it was just being quietly walking along a canal or cantering along a field. I just loved it.
Yeah. Oh, the impact it has is, huge. And you know what's nice as well sometimes is the being childlike as well.
Oh yes, definitely.
So I'm not a surfer. I've only just started to lose my fear of the water, but we've got a paddle board, and we went out on the paddle board Sunday a week ago for the first time ever, and laugh. It was just so lovely to laugh and giggle. Although I didn't try and stand up, in all fairness, we sat with our legs over the side. And that was a bit painful the next day, but it was so good to do that. And it really made me realise, come on, you need to, I'm always talking about self-care. Self-care is something that's really important, but it made me realise maybe you need to do things, a bit more fun things at times.
Keep saying that to my husband. We need more fun. Have fun. And just talking about paddleboard reminded me of something that's quite relevant. I think I've been paddleboarding once or twice. First of all, I have this fear of falling. Okay, and I remember seeing a hypnotherapist a few years ago, and he regressed me, and then I found out that actually that fear of falling was because we'd been playing, long story short, we'd been playing in the cellar while my parents were putting a carpet down to cover the concrete floor because the banisters were wide apart and we were all very young. And my sister and I were playing, and then I'd had enough, and we were laughing and laughing, and she was trying to pull me back, and I was trying to go back up, and I was like, no, I don't want to. I want to go back up. I was only 6. And as she pulled me back, I lost my balance, reached out for a banister, and my 2-year-old brother was there, and I knocked him through the banisters, and he broke his skull. So I've always been aware of that, but never really thought about it as why, crossing a wobbly bridge, or it was actually going on a walk with some of our Yorkshire practitioners when we were looking down into the valley. And I was talking to Irily about it. And actually she said, do you think it's more of a fear of falling rather than a fear of heights? I'd always thought it was a fear of heights. And I went, of course it is. It's a fear of falling, because I can look over it. Looks great. Put me on the edge and look down. People on the edge and look down. That's where it was most challenging. And I remember paddleboarding, and this one particular time, I'd already been paddleboarding before, and no big issue, had enjoyed it. But I do remember the same thing happening. I had gone to Scarborough with a young refugee that I used to support, and he'd not done it before. And we went on the paddleboard, got on the paddleboard, and my legs just were doing this.
Oh, yes.
And in my head, consciously, it was August bank holiday. Beautiful warm day. I'm in a wetsuit anyway because we had to, and I was standing on the paddleboard, and primarily my primal brain was freaking out. Consciously, I'm going, for goodness sake, there's nothing wrong here, I'm fine. This is a good few years ago. Calm my breathing down, and it was still going, and I just thought, rather than spend too long and wasting the hour I've got on the paddleboard, I just jumped in the water, got back up, fine, because I'd fallen into the water. Oh, I'm still alive. Primal brain calmed down, and it's safe. And interestingly, this Cornwall weekend we just had, there was a lot of climbing and walking around edges of coastal paths, and always wanting to be right on the edge. And I've been getting better anyway, but this time I really decided I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this climbing, and I was so much better than I had been, a few years ago anyway. And you can't test it all the time.
No.
But whenever we go for coastal walks or something, my kids and my husband are always like the dangerous stuff. They always want to climb the steepest cliff and stand on the edge and lie on their tummies and look over. And it's like, oh.
I going up is my struggle. Coming down is easy. So when I was in Africa about 5 years ago, we climbed Mount Melange. So going up to a higher level was challenging, but we did it, and no problem. Coming down, I chose to go on the fastest route, and we had some ledges that were particularly narrow, shall we say.
Right.
I had no fear.
Really?
And it was really weird, because I knew, like you was, I was very conscious, and I was thinking, isn't it funny how we react in different scenarios? So the going up, and the only difference is learning to ski. So when I learned to ski, I didn't learn to ski till I was 40.
Right.
And standing at the top, thinking I've got to ski all the way down there, absolutely so frightening. It was like, no. But I was determined I'm going to learn. And then it started to snow shower. And where most people went home, I actually loved it, because I couldn't see where I was going. So I couldn't see how far.
No,
I could only see a short distance and ski in the moment. And once I've got that and I've got confident, then somebody said to me, "You do know that's really hard to ski like that."
And it's so all in the head. I mean, you put a plank of wood 4 inches wide on the ground, then most people could do that. I'd do that easily. Put that a lot higher. I mean, let's say the level of the first floor or whatever of a house. That would be, for many people, be very challenging, because suddenly there's that primal fear that I might fall. But it's still that same block of wood. Yeah. So, and it's the mindset, and this is so relevant with our work, isn't it? That it's just it's mindset.
It's the messaging.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's what I like when Dr. Howard Schubiner talks about the brain and the messaging. That if you cut your finger, it's not your finger that feels the pain. We may feel the pain in the finger, but it's not our finger that's feeling the pain. It's a neural messaging that's saying, "Oh, I've cut my finger. Oh, that must hurt."
Yeah, absolutely. And that always makes me think of my son who fractured his knee. In fact, we were talking about it while we were in Cornwall. He fractured his knee kite surfing, and he didn't know he'd broken anything. He tried to get back on the board. The only reason he knew there was something wrong was his leg gave way. He actually needed surgery on his knee because he had fractured the plateau. But he had no pain. And he went to the hospital, he was on the ward, and he didn't have any pain. And it was really interesting after surgery because he was given this strong medication, but when he needed it was always the time when he was worrying about work, or, you know, I ought to be doing more or whatever, rather than just your body's telling you to just back off and recover. So yeah, it's so interesting, and the different scenarios that people, I know somebody else was saying, oh, that's such a painful injury, I've had it. And I said, yes, but you're totally different. You know, you just had a baby. You had broken your knee and you were in hospital trying to breastfeed a baby and trying not to be separated from the baby. You know, my son was doing something he loved and was just thinking, oh, now it's my turn to hurt my knee. Everybody else has done it. And it was a completely different scenario, and therefore pain or no pain.
Yeah.
And it's remembering it at the time, isn't it? At the time, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. And being able to breathe through it, because we talk about breathing, and I'll be honest, there was a time when years ago I'd think, oh, don't tell me to breathe. You know, I'm not feeling well. Actually, we teach it in pregnancy, but we don't teach it in other modalities or other areas of medicine, which actually is, you know, when you think of the power of breath, and how we can self-soothe and calm ourselves down, it really is powerful.
It's hugely powerful. And the other thing it does when we think we're doing the breathing, not just the actual breathing, but if you're getting out of your head and focusing on the breath, you're going into your body. Because I would suggest the majority of people, well, the majority of people anyway, but certainly people who come into this work are trying to learn, understand, reading the books, trying to understand, right, I need to do this, I need to do that. And, you know, yes, but I'm doing this. Why aren't I better? I've read all the books. Why aren't I better? And trying to work things out. And is my symptom in my body or is it not? You know, and all that creates this pressure, trying and trying, doesn't it? And whereas actually, even just that, and that's something I would always do with my clients. First thing is actually, okay, let's just practice some breathing, going into your body, focusing on your heart, and just taking your attention out of your head. And even without doing anything else, that often just lets them calm down, and often the pain calms down. It doesn't always at that point, but they're learning to do that when they're not feeling as wound up, so that when the more they practice it, the more they can do it when they need it, which is what I found cold water immersion so helpful for, because practicing that, you know, it's so easy to just go, that is so much harder to cope with the cold and the pain of the cold when it's really, really cold in the winter. Whereas actually, if you do some calm, deep breathing, and then you breathe in and then breathe out as you get into the water, and then keep your breathing calm, it's so much easier.
And there's also an additional reason for that as well. So when we breathe in, we're actually breathing in. We're breathing in energy, but we're using a little bit of our adrenaline when we breathe in. So when you think of anxiety and it's lots of short breaths, that's where we're exacerbating adrenaline. You know, we're in the sympathetic mode, our heart rate's increasing, our breath is really shallow. But it's when we focus on the long out breath, that's when it goes into parasympathetic. So it actually physically switches off the adrenaline. And I remember when I was diagnosed as chronic asthmatic, and I was going through a very stressful time years ago, and I was hospitalized as well. Somebody saying to me, you know, focus on breathing, you know, try three deep breaths. And I felt like I was doing an exercise class. and then I was like, and then they were like, and when you get anxious, I was like, I can't do it when I'm calm, let alone when I'm anxious. How can I do this? And it's something that I, you know, as a practitioner, it's something I work with my clients, you know, and I will say, practice doing it hourly.
Yes.
Because the more you practice it, it becomes second nature. And also the other thing is focus on the out breath. Not the in breath.
And not necessarily being a deep breath. It doesn't have to be a deep breath, just a calm breath, and preferably through the nose. And actually breathing through the nose increases nitric acid, which actually allows the airways to open up. So even when I'm in an exercise class, I try to actually do outdoor running around and boot camp stuff. And when I'm getting my breath after a run, which we had to Tuesday night, God, you made us run. But I just kept, once I started getting my breath back, I deliberately closed my mouth to allow the airways to open up to get my air back, get my breath back more quickly. But yes, slow breathing, nasal breathing, and breathing out as the parasympathetic just calms the system. And it's such a thing.
It's always good if you've got a wellness basket, as I have, and I'm always talking about having bubbles.
Yes. Yeah.
Bubbles is a really good.
Fun.
Yeah, it's fun, and it gives you a focus.
Yeah.
And I think it's, and you can get the large bubbles now, which is even better.
Yes. I keep coming across recipes on, on social media or something, recipes to make the stuff to put in a bubble so you can do it yourself.
Well, I haven't gone that far, but I could have a quick look. Yeah.
Yes. So, does anybody have any questions or anything they want us to talk about or discuss, or any insights or experiences you've had relevant to what we've been talking about? So please do. We'll carry on for another 10 minutes or so, but please do post a comment in if you'd like to mention anything. In the meantime, Beverley.
One of the things I was thinking of sharing with you, I was talking with someone the other day, and we were talking about migraines.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember about 20 years ago, I was going to the chemist regularly with a prescription, taking tablets for my migraines, which were frequent, and they were debilitating, made me sick, really not nice at all. And I remember going in and to this lovely chemist, and him pulling me aside one day and asking me about my stomach and my bowel movements. And I was a bit, this is my head. It's nothing to do with my stomach. And he said, actually, migraines originate, they start from your stomach. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what do you mean? And he recommended that I started taking psyllium husks and started to think about my stomach, especially when I was eating. And I really couldn't understand where he was coming from. But I followed what he was saying, and I went backwards and forwards. And it was only when I actually really started to get involved with mind, body, medicine, and really do lots of reading about it, I started to see the connection. And it was the stress that was holding, that was creating the migraine. So, and the stress and the tension started in my stomach. And it's something I'm always aware of now.
Yeah, hence have people often being sick when they have migraines as well.
Absolutely.
I remember when I used to have migraines as well, that I remember coming home from work once because I had a migraine, driving home. I don't know how I managed to get home, because by the time I got home, I literally crawled up the stairs. And thankfully, my husband was at home, and he upstairs, so he was able to go and get me the tablets. I used to have some migraine relief. By then, I think it was something else I took. And so he brought them to me. But even then, I was aware that once I just sort of let go, because I'd got home, and I let go and let myself really relax, even before I fell asleep, everything was easing off. I didn't understand it at that point. Right, so Danny says, when the body says no, any recommendations? What do you mean by any recommendations? Certainly the book's good. So are you meaning any recommendations for other books? So I suddenly had a panic then. I saw one of my cats here, and I just thought, oh God, he hasn't brought a mouse in here. Keep finding them.
Well, I saw that as when the body says no, any recommendations. And to be honest, I think that comes back to how we were first talking about how our bodies are made to survive. And I don't know, Danny, if you were here right from the beginning, but I often think, if my body is physically reacting because I'm going somewhere, or I'm thinking about a client here actually, a client had a wedding, typing too quick, should have said, would you?
Would we recommend when the body says no? Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's all interlinked with all the work that we do.
Yeah, and the one thing I like about, when the body says no, also the body holds the score, or unlearn your pain, is they give you information. It's education and it's awareness. And once we have awareness of what's happening, it gives us choices and options on checking in with ourselves. And I've got a client that I'm working with currently who had a family gathering that was coming up to him, and he was really ill with back pain.
Oh, yes.
And he hadn't put the two together. He was just really worried that he wasn't going to get to this wedding.
Yes. Yeah.
And then when I asked questions and unravelled things, it wasn't the wedding that he didn't want to go to. It was the other things that were happening, about where he was going to sleep, about what if he wasn't well? And so once we were able to unravel that and see where the stress was coming from, he was then able to then put in place, obviously, the breathing, but also being able to bend over and stretch out a little bit more, because the more stressed he got, the tighter his lower back was.
Yes, absolutely.
So even in a chair, by breathing and then just bending forward a little bit, at one time he said, that was my chair squeaking. I'm moving around here. I'm trying not to move because it squeaks all the time. But it made such a difference. And not only did he go to the wedding in the end, he drove for 5 hours and didn't have any pain.
Wow, that's brilliant. And like you say, even just doing the calm breathing, just sitting in a chair, if you've got pain in a chair or bending over, often just doing really calm breathing for a while calms the system down, and then you can see the difference that makes with movement and being able to then do a movement that you'd struggle with. But I think that I love that term, when the body says no, anyway, because so often it is, like you've just said, and I know one of my clients has missed 2 major birthdays of the same person, a major birthday and the one after, miss them by being really badly ill each time. But when you look at the scenario around it, and having to go and see people she didn't particularly want to see, you could see why that happens. And that's, I know I've experienced that before, and now, thankfully, I think with more awareness, it's easier to start noticing what's going on and deal with that. But it really is at showing, okay, if something comes up, okay, what is it? What's been going on? And what is your body reacting against? What is it you're not wanting to do? And by exploring that often helps as well.
Yeah.
Daddy says I use distraction as a remedy. Oh dear. Okay, so distraction's good, because you've got to get on with stuff and do things. So distraction is not a definite no. If you're just using distraction and not actually dealing with the underlying emotional stuff, then I wouldn't be saying do that. I would say do something, and then by all means distract yourself from the pain, but deal with the emotions. And playing your drums, great, absolutely do that. Is that then, do you have pain, Danny, when you're playing the drums, or do you not? Because often many people say, I'm distracted so I don't notice my pain. Whereas I think actually you don't have any pain because you're in flow, in the moment, doing something you love. You don't need that pain. You've got a distraction from the emotions. You don't need the pain as a distraction from the emotions. Does that make sense?
And the one thing I'm seeing from playing drums, what a great way to work out, to release your emotions.
Yeah,
and I'm thinking,
you're in flow, you're just doing things you love. And if you're angry, you can do an angry drumming. Is that how you do it? Music is wonderful.
Yes.
Sort of things. So this is why I wouldn't suggest that drums alone are. Well, I would be saying drums. Your drumming is probably more of a distraction from the pain rather than from the emotions. Because and it takes away the fact that you don't need the pain to distract you, because that's basically what pain is, a manifestation of unresolved emotions. So it's actually distracting you from the emotions. But distraction in itself is not an issue as long as we're still looking after ourselves, working on the underlying stuff. It's focus. What does IMO mean?
It's focus IMO.
Is that my?
Moment?
Is that? No, that's what I thought. First of all, is it my age? Yes, the underlying need. You feel, but sitting there in pain doesn't work. Yeah, no, sitting in pain and focusing on the pain doesn't help. But certainly doing some more somatic work, emotional, in my opinion. Of course, that is, yes. I should have known that, Donny. Oops. Yes. So yeah, but the more focus you put on the pain, yeah, you don't want to be doing that. So yes, if you're sitting there and you're sort of, oh, you're in pain, that's not a great idea. But if you are in pain and you can do some somatic work, emotional awareness, and the calm breathing, allowing it, not resisting it, not fighting it, being curious, all this somatic work can be really, really helpful. All right.
Catch up, I'm probably older than you.
Do you know what? I did know it, but in that moment, I thought exactly the same as you in the moment. Yeah. But no, okay, I have heard of it. Lucinda's here. Okay, I'm a little confused. David Hankin say, yes, David has a slightly different explanation. Can you advise it? Basically, anxiety is the pain. Pain is a form of anxiety. It's a manifestation of anxiety. Anxiety isn't an emotion. Fear is an emotion. Anxiety is a manifestation. Anxiety in itself is not an emotion. I don't think I said it was, did I?
I always think of anxiety. I've turned it around. It's actually, thank you, buddy, because you're trying to keep me safe.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, in the past, when I've had anxiety attacks, you know, when I didn't understand them, they were all consuming. They took over me. They controlled me. But once I realised what was happening, I was able to say, okay, thank you. You feel that I'm unsafe.
Yeah.
Let's touch in with the reality, because our body is trying to keep us safe, but it doesn't know a timeline. So it's keeping us safe from an experience that we've had, whether it be a day ago, a week ago, or years ago.
Yeah.
So that's the time when I slow down my breathing, it gives me the opportunity to think, okay, is this danger real? Or if it's not, what is it I'm anxious about? So, for instance, I don't like going on a packed underground train. And we went to a concert on Friday, and the only way home was to get on the underground. And there's 45,000 people leaving the ground. And although not all of them are going on the train, we are sneaking through. And I could feel my anxiety rising. So I was doing the breathing, doing the distraction techniques that Danny's talking about, laughing. I was a little bit tetchy at times. I'm not saying I wasn't. I'm a human being. But what I was able to do was recognize my anxiety. I was able to breathe through it, distract through it, and actually reassure myself. And it was the best thing. So even at times when, as we entered the station, that's when it became higher. It was like, no. And again, that reassuring. I had water with me. I could take off my layers. No issue. So we can thank our body with the anxiety.
And the anxiety is the pain. You know, basically pain is, as Danny says, anxiety is a coping mechanism. Pain is a coping mechanism. They're all trying to protect us. And what David Hanscom is basically saying is that anxiety is the pain. So pain is anxiety in a different way.
Yeah.
With a different
yeah, and it's different conversation, different language. So Lucinda, I understand where some of the confusion comes from. But so when we repress our emotions, and that's what fear does, because the fear is, I don't want to feel anything. When we oppress the emotions, it can only come out in other ways, such as anxiety. It can only come out in ways of pain. But it's showing us that there's something there that we are looking to release. We don't want to.
Yeah.
You know, there's a part of our body saying, oh, no, actually, I don't want to. But when we learn how to access that, it enables us to acknowledge it and release it. I hope that helps.
And I think it's very common for people when they resolve their pain, and we were talking about this in our Peer Connect last night, that people end up with anxiety, because it's anxiety coming out of the body. You know, whether it's a pain, another symptom, it's all related to anxiety. It's a way of protecting the body.
And the other thing that I think is really important, and it's something I talk about all the time, when I talk about self-care, it's more for prevention rather than crisis.
Yes.
Because if we only use self-care when we're in crisis, all we're doing is firefighting.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas self-care, for me, is an important part of my everyday living, as it is getting washed and dressed.
Yeah.
And I actually have it in my diary, because we diarise. There's no such thing now in my vocabulary as I haven't got time for self-care.
Yeah. Oh no.
If I haven't got time for self-care, then I really need to look at myself. And I appreciate that some self-care takes more time than others. Mm-hmm. But my everyday basic self-care with breathing, with being outside, even for 10 minutes, that's very important. And I think it's a good way to start checking in with yourself as you start to feel any flutters, especially if it's a day by day.
That's exactly what I was going to say, that it doesn't mean you've got to take half an hour for this, that, or the other. But the more we develop our interoception, our felt sense, the more we are aware of how we're feeling, the quicker we can respond when we're triggered. So it might be that somebody's triggered by an email that comes in, but they're busy, so they just keep going with the email. And it might be another email an hour later then actually triggers a symptom because they haven't dealt with all what was going on in the previous hour. So this is about actually becoming more emotionally aware, so that when you are triggered, whatever that might be, that you then even just I sometimes just literally go out on the patio and do some calm breathing for a couple of minutes. It might need, depending on how big the trigger, it might need more. But generally, and sometimes I've missed it, and I was talking to one of our practitioners earlier in the week and just saying, I had an email and I thought I was okay with it. And then there's something else happened a little while later. And then I thought I dealt with that because I felt a response. But actually, when I was addressing it, the other one was popping in. Thinking, oh, okay, I think that was actually more than I thought it was. So it enabled me to then deal with that. But by dealing with them, then it's building on your resilience. It's helping you not just do what we all used to do and hopefully don't anymore, which is just ignoring things, and things get built up and build up and build up. And so, not surprising, we're more reactive to little things.
And there's also that delayed response.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a person, I'm very reflective. So if something happens, such as an emergency, I can respond to an emergency really well.
Oh, yes.
Deal with it, no problem. It's afterwards. Sometimes it can be as you're walking away, I can feel my body changing. Sometimes it can be a few days later.
Mm.
So you think, oh, yeah, that's okay, I've dealt with that. And a few days later, and it's often when I'm speaking with clients or anyone in a conversation, and they say they've got a pain or they're not feeling well, the first thing I say is, oh, what have you been doing for the last couple of weeks? And I say that on purpose.
Yes.
Because we don't realise sometimes what we're doing.
Mm.
And we get on with things, and especially when you're a certain type of person, it's like, I can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can do that. Oh, I've only been doing that, and I've only been doing this, and I just did that.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly, when we look back, we can see that all these little things that we've been doing, they're multi-layered, multifaceted.
Yeah.
Actually, we've done an awful lot.
Yeah, and people do dismiss it, saying, oh, but that was little. And the more we start to recognize, to feel what's going on and to deal with things, then they're not going to then build up. But yeah, and also it's often it's triggered down the line because we then start brewing over it. We go into the story, and it's going into the story and reflecting on it and then judging it and then, you know, just going into this, overthinking about it, that then often will trigger something more than just the initial emotion, because it's not just what's happened, it's just that we've not dealt with it, and then we're going into the story, and that builds it up. So Danny says he's noticed that quite naturally, without the teaching on breathing, that I will often take deep breaths, and I know that whilst I'm doing that, this is in response to a stressor and attempt to remain calm. Yeah, absolutely, Danny. And all I would say is that a stress response is to take a deep breath, and it's often in the shoulders and up here. And that's why I don't like it when people say, take a deep breath, because it's not a deep breath. It's a calm, it's just a calm, connected breath. So it's calmly breathing in and out, and preferably diaphragmatic with the belly coming in and out, but not up here. So the deep breathing when we're stressed is a stress response. And as soon as, like going into cold water. So I sort of started, I finished going to cold water, whereas actually that teaches you to notice when you get like that, and to go, and a slow, calm out breath, and then to calm your breathing down. So that's also what I found cold water immersion helps with, is that the more I've practiced that, the more quickly I notice, as soon as I'm going, or just take a deep breath with stress, that I go, okay, calm my breathing, what's going on? Anyway, we need to call that a day, but thank you for your comments. Oh, wait a minute, Angela says, I relate to that delay response and or stacking things over a period of a couple of days. I'm not listening as close. No, as close as it could be to your body. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think we can all relate to that, Angela. We're not perfect, you know, but the more aware we are, the more we can deal with things as we go along. And Danny, no, that's fine. It often isn't in a panicky way. It's just you notice that you're taking a deep breath. If you're taking a deep breath to calmly breathe out, then that's fine, as long as you then just continue to calmly breathe. It's this sort of deep breathing that it's because people generally say, take a deep breath every time you're stressed to let you calm down, but actually deep breathing and fast breathing ends up being fast breathing, and that's part of the stress response. So a nice calm breath is fine. As we said, the breathing out triggers the parasympathetic response as well, which is the self-soothing. Great. Well, nice to see you all. Thank you very much. Thanks for the questions. It always helps, or the comments. And this will be up here. If you missed the first part, it'll be recorded and on the Facebook page anyway. But in the meantime, thank you all. The words and how we say them matter too. They absolutely do, Angela. Watch what you're saying all the time. All the time. All the time. Okay, take care, everybody. Thanks very much, Beverley, as well. Bye. No, thank you. Bye. Bye-bye.